In 2003, 19-year-old Elizabeth Holmes dropped out of Stanford University with a revolutionary idea that would supposedly change healthcare forever. She claimed she could run hundreds of medical tests using just a single drop of blood, making testing faster, cheaper, and more accessible than ever before. Within 12 years, her company THERANOS was valued at $9 billion, making Holmes the youngest female billionaire in history. But by 2018, THERANOS had completely collapsed. Holmes was convicted of fraud and sentenced to 11 years in prison. Investors lost nearly $1 billion. Patients received inaccurate medical results that could have killed them. And the entire scandal revealed systematic failures that every entrepreneur needs to understand if they want to avoid building companies on foundations that are destined to crumble. Here's what makes the THERANOS collapse so instructive for modern entrepreneurs. Elizabeth Holmes didn't fail because she lacked ambition, funding, or initial success. She failed because she violated 3 fundamental principles of sustainable business building that turned early promise into inevitable disaster. Understanding these failures can save entrepreneurs from making the same systematic mistakes that destroyed one of Silicon Valley's most celebrated startups. The first critical failure that doomed THERANOS was what I call technology fantasy over reality validation. Holmes built an entire company around technology that didn't exist, then spent 15 years trying to make reality match her promises, instead of building promises around proven reality. When Holmes founded THERANOS, she claimed her breakthrough technology could run comprehensive blood tests using tiny blood samples. But here's the problem. This technology never actually worked. Instead of developing the technology first and then building a business around proven capabilities, Holmes created elaborate marketing campaigns, raised massive funding, and made grand public promises based on technology that existed only in her imagination. This technology fantasy approach forced THERANOS into a devastating cycle of deception. When their revolutionary blood testing machines couldn't deliver promised results, instead of admitting the technology wasn't ready, they secretly used traditional machines from other companies and diluted tiny blood samples to dangerous levels. When these workarounds still couldn't produce reliable results, they falsified test data and misled patients, doctors, and investors about the accuracy of their testing. The practical result was that THERANOS became increasingly dependent on covering up technological failures rather than solving them. Every fake demonstration, every false claim, and every misleading investor presentation made it harder to eventually admit the truth and pivot to sustainable technology approaches. But the strategic disaster was that Holmes had built a company culture where admitting technological limitations was treated as failure rather than essential information for making better business decisions. This created systematic pressure to lie about capabilities, which eventually made honest technological development impossible. The second critical failure was reputation substitution for substance validation. Holmes understood that credibility was essential for a healthcare company, but instead of building credibility through proven results, she focused on acquiring prestigious names and associations that would make people assume her technology worked without actually verifying it. THERANOS recruited an extraordinary board of directors, including former Secretaries of State Henry Kissinger and George Shultz, former Secretary of Defense James Mattis, and other political and business luminaries. Holmes appeared on magazine covers, gave TED Talks, and cultivated relationships with influential media figures who presented her as a visionary entrepreneur changing the world. But here's what Holmes missed. Prestigious associations can enhance real credibility, but they cannot replace it. None of these impressive board members had medical or scientific expertise to evaluate whether THERANOS technology actually worked. They were lending their reputations to a company based on Holmes' presentations and promises, not independent verification of technological capabilities. This reputation substitution created a dangerous feedback loop. The more prestigious people associated with THERANOS, the more other prestigious people wanted to be involved, assuming that someone else had verified the technology. Investors, partners, and patients made decisions based on the assumption that surely someone with Henry Kissinger's experience wouldn't associate with a fraudulent company. Meanwhile, the actual scientists and medical professionals who could have identified Theranos' technological problems were either excluded from key decisions or pressured to stay quiet about concerns that might undermine the company's prestigious image. The third critical failure was growth acceleration without foundation verification. Holmes pursued rapid expansion, high-profile partnerships, and massive valuations before establishing that her core technology could reliably deliver promised results at any scale. Theranos announced partnerships with major pharmacy chains like Walgreens, opened testing centers across multiple states, and processed thousands of patient blood tests, while knowing their technology couldn't accurately analyze most of the tests they were selling. Instead of scaling gradually while perfecting their technology, they scaled rapidly while hoping their technology problems would somehow resolve themselves. This premature scaling created catastrophic consequences that went far beyond business failure. Real patients received inaccurate blood test results that could have led to incorrect medical treatments, unnecessary procedures, or missed diagnoses of serious conditions. Holmes had prioritized business growth over patient safety, turning technological limitations into potentially life-threatening medical risks. Here's what's most important for entrepreneurs to understand about the Theranos collapse. These weren't random mistakes or bad luck. They were systematic violations of fundamental business principles that made failure inevitable regardless of how much funding, publicity, or prestigious support Holmes managed to attract. Technology fantasy over reality validation creates businesses built on promises that cannot be delivered. Reputation, substitution for substance validation creates credibility that cannot be maintained when scrutinized. Growth acceleration without foundation verification creates scale that amplifies problems rather than solving them. Modern entrepreneurs face tremendous pressure to move fast, think big, and fake it until they make it. The Theranos collapse demonstrates why this approach is not just risky, it's systematically destructive to everyone involved. Successful entrepreneurs build technology first, then make promises. They earn credibility through proven results, then attract prestigious associations. They establish solid foundations, then scale systematically. Elizabeth Holmes had extraordinary ambition, exceptional fundraising abilities, and remarkable talent for attracting support from influential people. But she applied these strengths to building a company that violated basic principles of sustainable business development. The entrepreneurs who avoid Theranos-style collapses are those who prioritize substance over perception, validation over promises, and sustainable growth over rapid scaling. They understand that lasting success comes from building companies that can deliver on their promises rather than companies that are experts at making promises they cannot deliver. The question every entrepreneur should ask isn't, how can I build the most impressive company as quickly as possible? The question is, how can I build a company that will still be creating value for customers, employees, and investors 20 years from now? Elizabeth Holmes forgot that business success isn't about convincing people you've solved problems. It's about actually solving problems.